Tea Party, thank you guys.
And
Okay.
introduce himself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All right. Worcester Tea Party, thank you guys very much for having me. I've had a chance to meet several of you over the course of the years. Probably one of the times that I run into people the most is down at the Tax Day rally every April 15th down at the Common. Didn't happen this year. And instead, there was a anti-Trump rally at Cambridge Commons. And so we decided, you know what? We go down every year. We're going to go there. Because those are the people we want to talk to, right? We want to break through their heads and try to get some stuff in. So, in order to do that, I had to find a way to talk about libertarianism as a core idea that should appeal to everybody in Massachusetts. The idea of liberty. Massachusetts, we're the home of the Sons of Liberty. We have a tradition. If there's a state that should be leading the March of Liberty, it's us. We understand the ideas behind it. There wouldn't have been an American Revolution without John Adams being a pain in the ass and saying, no. You know what? England, if you think about it, England at the time of the Revolution was the most enlightened country in the world. It was the country that had the most freedom. But that wasn't enough for John Adams. That wasn't enough for the founding fathers. They're like, you know what? 90% freedom, that's not our birthright. Our birthright is 100% freedom. That's what they fought for, and that's what we're fighting for right now. And I'm going to talk about the Libertarian Party, which is I am the political director of the Libertarian Party of Massachusetts. I ran for Congress in 2012 in the 6th District. I ran for Senate in 2013. Could not, in a snowy February special election, get 15,000 signatures, even though Al came out and helped me gather signatures, and I appreciate that. Run for a couple races since then. I think I've hit my running shelf life, so now I'm out doing a dog and pony show, and I want to talk about liberty. But first, I'm going to start you guys off with a question. When was the last election without an incumbent president that did not have a Clinton or a Bush running for president?
Right.
Let's think about it, right? 2016, obviously, we have Hillary Clinton running. 2012, there's an incumbent, Barack Obama. 2008, Hillary Clinton runs in the primary, right? 2004, George Bush is the incumbent. 2000, George Bush runs for president. 96, Clinton is the incumbent. 92, we actually have Bush against Clinton again. 88, George Bush runs for president. 84, Reagan is the incumbent. 1980, George Bush Sr. runs for president against Reagan in the primary. 1976, we have an incumbent. Gerald Ford is the incumbent. 1972, Richard Nixon is the incumbent. 1968 is the last election without an incumbent, without a Bush or a Clinton running for office. And one of the things that the Libertarian Party has as its heritage is that we actually were born in 1972 in response to the idea that Richard Nixon was engaged in a massive war and a massive escalation of the size of government. And the Libertarian Party grew out of that. I can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to keep quizzing you guys. Who knows what this picture is?
D-Day.
Normandy.
D-Day, exactly right.
Okay.
And I have to tell you, it's such a relief to be in a crowd where people say D-Day, because I gave this at a college, and they said, oh, that's Saving Private Ryan. Now, the fact of the matter is, the victors do write history. I was lucky enough to go study in England for a year, and while I was there, I took a class 1 week from a professor from each of the Allied nations on the history of World War II. I knew the United States version of World War II, you guys know it pretty well. The English version of World War II is that at the end of the war, Roosevelt was incapacitated by polio, and Churchill had to stop him from giving away Eastern Europe to the Russians. The Russian version of World War II is the Americans and the British wanted the Germans to kill us, but when we were too strong, they decided they'd help us instead. And the French version of World War II is how we cunningly pretended to surrender so that we could sabotage the Germans from behind their lines.
That's great.
And the problem is that that's what they're teaching. That's what they're learning. We can go to the next slide. Now this, tougher question. Who knows who's the quote? Après moi le déluge.
After me, the flood.
After me, Louis XIV. Louis XIV recognized, he's like, you know what, we have been living pretty awesome for a long time, But the peasants, they're revolted. It's actually supposedly the Anne Boleyn Court. This is the Bastille. They tore it down in 1789, same year that we had our Constitution. And in the same class in England, I was lucky enough to study the French Revolution, and we studied it in a very unique way. We only read primary documents. We read newspapers from Paris describing what was happening in those days. And on the day of the Bastille, the French peasants' paper said there was a huge uprising, we stormed the Bastille, we released the political prisoners. The tradesman's paper said there was a huge traffic jam at Bastille Square, crowds were not able to get through, things were not delivered. The clerical paper, the church paper, said there was a tremendous loss of life, bloodshed at the Bastille, and we had to help a lot of people. And the royalist paper, the king's paper, said the king went dominant today. So, we know this. History is written by the winners, and as far back as 2,000 years ago, the newspapers, the media, has been feeding us the information that they want to feed us, that suits their narrative, which is based on their audience. So, when we're faced with our country, and we're trying to talk about liberty, which is supposed to be our heritage, we have to think about what have people been told for such a long time. I go to the next slide. People have been programmed against liberty by the media. And the Libertarian Party, that's our mission. Because we want to talk about the fact that people should recognize there's so many ways that their liberty is controlled by the media, by the government. There's people who talk about the idea that there's a right to health care. Now I know in this room, I'm not going to get anybody who's going to agree that people have a right to health care. But when I talk about that with liberals, I don't say, you know, you're wrong, you're crazy. I say, healthcare is provided to you by a healthcare provider, right? Healthcare provider. That provider is a person. They are giving you their labor. If you have a right to healthcare, do you have a right to somebody else's labor? Isn't that what the 13th Amendment was about? Are you implying that your right to healthcare necessitates that somebody has to work for you? And they start thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. So sometimes I'll say to them, I say, well, I'd like to say that we have a duty as a society, as a generous people, and I do believe Americans are the most generous people on the planet. We have a duty to provide health care for everybody, but nobody has a right to anybody else's labor. We have learned helplessness, right? We have a group of people that have learned that the government is going to take care of them. The nanny state. A set of people who believe that they are entitled. And in fact, recently I learned that, so I'm a little bit old to call myself Generation X, but I still do. But the new generation, they are being derogatively called Generation E, Generation Entitled, because they have this belief. They are entitled to a college education, right? Free college, you hear it all the time. They are entitled to a job when they come out of work. They are entitled to, if they get a job, only work 40 hours a week. This belief that has been taught to them, perpetuated by what we see. The Libertarian Party, our political issue at this point in time is saying, you know what? You cannot be entitled to things because your entitlement is based on somebody else providing you. And when we talk about that, then we're talking about respecting individual liberty. You can't have what you think you're entitled to if you respect somebody else's liberty. Because otherwise you have to force them to give it to you. You guys know the story about Michael Bloomberg and how he banned restaurants in New York City from giving food at the end of the day to the homeless shelters? So, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. And the argument that they made was that the food was not safe and nobody was inspecting it. However, 5 minutes before, the food was safe enough to be served in a restaurant, and the restaurant is inspected pretty heavily in New York City. So somehow in this magical 5 minutes, what's really the rationale why they did that? They don't want charity to come from the people. They want charity to come from the state. It's this idea of learned helplessness. They don't want people who need a meal, and sometimes people are down on the luck, whatever, and they go in and they see a Big Mac Or they see, a thing from Greenblatt's is my favorite deli in New York City. They see a big bag from Greenblatt's. They don't think, oh, that came from the government. They think it came from somebody else via charity. They're learning to selflessness. The nanny state, the cult. And that's what we've got right now. Now go to the next slide, please, Jim. Big tents, little tents, intense. Little thing you might not know about libertarians. What do we hate? We tend to fight amongst ourselves. One of the reasons, maybe the big reason, libertarians tend to portray themselves, portray ourselves poorly, is because we have the stupidest infighting there could ever be. Excuse me. I had to put the roads up there just because that's a common thing people tell us. Oh, libertarians, they want to get rid of all the roads. I ran for city council in Beverly. The reason I ran, I wasn't planning on running, Beverly passed a law that said out-of-state driver's licenses could not be used as a form of ID in Beverly. Now, believe it or not, that's actually a relatively common law in Massachusetts. Amherst has the same law. College towns tend to limit it. What happened was a couple kids from Endicott, which is a little private college, came into town, boozed it up, went back on campus, wrecked a car. Endicott complained to Beverly, oh, your town's terrible, you let my kids buy alcohol. Beverly responded by passing this ordinance. A friend of mine is a restaurant owner, there are only 14 liquor licenses in Beverly. I said, Dan, we can't complain. But it's ridiculous. We had 4 weddings canceled because kids get married in their 20s. Who's going to want to have a wedding when their friends can't have a toast with them at the end of the day? So, I ran. I thought I had a pretty good issue. Of course, one of the important things to know is that when you run, your voice is amplified. So even though I thought I had a chance to win, as I started talking about my issue, people were like, wow, I didn't know that was a law. I'm like, yeah, no, they did. You can't use out-of-state driver's license anywhere. They're like, oh, that's ridiculous. So 1 month into my election, me campaigning, they changed the law. So my issue was gone. I had nothing to run on anymore. I didn't have any kids who were playing soccer. I didn't go to grow up going to the YMCA. I wasn't even in my city council race. But as I was standing there at the primary, somebody came up and they said, oh, Fishman, I liked everything you had to say. And then somebody told me you wanted to close all the schools. That's not really what we're about. But that's some of the things that people hear. So when you hear the roads, that's where I can go to the next slide, please. So I apologize to my people at my dinner table because they've heard this story before. The arsonist. And this is about talking about liberty, and what the Libertarian Party is trying to do right now. So we know that people have been programmed against liberty. We talked about it before. I want you to imagine a scenario. There's an arsonist. And when he sets the house on fire, he wants people to be trapped inside. That's his thing. So what he does beforehand is he dresses up as a police officer. He goes and he knocks on the door and he says, I need to tell you something. There's a sniper in the neighborhood. And if you come outside, he's going to shoot at you. So no matter what you hear, what you do, don't come outside until a policeman tells you that it's okay. And then he goes and he lights a fire behind the house. Now if you see this, how do you get the person to come outside? If you knock on the door and say, there's a fire, you gotta come out. Well, they're not gonna come out, of course not, right? If you try to pull them out, they're gonna fight you even harder. So what you have to do is you have to say, do you smell something? I smell something, it smells like something's burning, but I'm not sure what that smell is. I think I see smoke off in the distance. And then, there's something over there that's hot, and like when I touch it, it burned me. Could you come touch that thing and see what it is? And they'll touch it, and they're like, oh my God, the house is on fire, and they'll run out because they reached the conclusion on their own. The Republicans and the Democrats, with this budget we've had increasing over the years, have been burning down our collective house. And it's become apparent that the issues are changing. We talk about the Tea Party, right? How many people, in this room it's going to be 100% I suspect, but how many people remember what the T in Tea Party stands for? Taxed enough already. Okay? That's a fundamental idea. And when we talk about our taxes and how taxes are collected, we're talking about one of the greatest impositions upon us in terms of liberty. They tax cigarettes so that people won't smoke, right? Because smoking's bad. They tax alcohol because they don't want people to drink, because drinking is bad for you. Why are they taxing income? What do they think the consequences of that are? And then a much more important component to it is what Al was talking about. The core of libertarianism, the idea of self-ownership. You own yourself. And that principle has to be crystal clear. Because if you don't accept that principle, it means you imply that somebody else can own you, and you can own somebody else. Libertarians reject that idea. We all own ourselves. Self-ownership is critical. So if you own yourself, how is there a possibility that anybody has the first right to the product of your labor? But that's what the income tax is. Income tax says that when you earn money, the government gets its piece first. If you don't pay it, what happens? They're going to throw you in jail. And that's another important part about taxation. Do you pay taxes so you can have great roads? Do you pay taxes so you can have great schools? Or do you pay taxes because if you didn't, they'd throw you in jail? Taxation is based on force. And the other core principle of libertarianism, of the Libertarian Party of the United States, is what we call the non-aggression principle. Now, libertarians, you know we are the Second Amendment party, right? You know that we are a strong believer in people's right to defend themselves. But at the core of all of that is the idea that you should never commit an act of aggression against another person. You can defend yourself, that is your right. And your right is not granted you by the government, by the way. Your rights are yours, inalienable. That is the core of what our documents tell us. But when we talk about your rights to defend yourself, that doesn't mean you have the right to restrict somebody else's liberty. Libertarians, the Libertarian Party, self-ownership, and the non-aggression principle. These are the cores of everything that we believe in. So when we talk about the Libertarian Party and the non-aggression principle, we apply that to every single issue. So if you talk about any controversial issue right now in the United States, cannabis, marijuana, you probably think, oh, libertarians are in favor of marijuana. Libertarians don't care about marijuana. What we care about is the idea that you doing something that doesn't hurt anybody else, the government should not be able to restrict you from doing that. And that if we empower the government to restrict you from smoking marijuana when you're not hurting anybody else, we are giving the government power that they shouldn't have. When we talk about same-sex marriage, okay, the idea that the government gets to control who gets to be married, libertarians don't care about same-sex marriage. In fact, most libertarians tell you we want government entirely out of the marriage business entirely. But the idea that we would empower the government to say, to define what is a family, that's ridiculous, okay? Family definition, you know what a family is, it's right for you. The government should not be telling you these things. I can go through the next slide, okay? So, the NAP, the non-aggression principle, that is the core of the Libertarian Party right now. We apply it to everything. Cannabis, marriage equality, income tax, I talked about how it's based on violence. St. Patrick's Day Parade, right? Huge controversy about the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Boston, right, exactly, every year. So here's the thing. I support the right, libertarians who support the right, that people have whatever parade they want. Speech. Parade is speech. In fact, the government has ruled that along the way. But part of what they wanted was that there wouldn't be another parade 5 minutes behind them. And that's wrong. The idea that they can say, our speech is special, our parade is special, and nobody else can march 5 minutes behind us. Because why not? The police are already there. They set up the barricades, right? Why couldn't another group apply? Why not have 30 parades that day? But what we've been doing, and I mean now, the issue's sort of over. And the key of what I'm talking about is the idea of tolerance. The Libertarian Party of the United States recognizes that in order for you to have liberty, people have to tolerate it. The fact of the matter is that if you guys want to shut me up, you can. There's a lot of you and there's one of me. I have to have you tolerate my speech. Ron Paul has a wonderful quote. It says, we don't have freedom of speech so that we can talk about the weather. We have freedom of speech so we can say very controversial things. And the core of our political discourse must be that we can say these very controversial things to each other. And so that means when I get an opportunity to go down to Cambridge Common, right? I mean, that's the bowels of the beast, right? It doesn't get much more liberal than that. At an anti-Trump rally, I want to do that, and I want to go down there, and I want to say some controversial things, and I want to challenge them, and I want to push them around. But I want to go down there with a crafted message. Let's go to the next slide. We are a violent society. We know it now, right? We've seen more violence. For those of you who remember the 60s, there's always this idyllic idea of what the 60s were like. But in reality, the 60s were an incredibly violent decade, right? Major political assassinations, a draft, a war, people coming home, right? Soldiers giving their all for our country, coming back in bags. It was a violent time. Are we that violent right now? I don't know. But I know that we are getting more violent as time goes on. And the reason why is because we are making stupid laws that restrict people's liberty. And in America, our heritage, we were birthed in rebellion. When our liberty is restricted, we push against it. I'm going to give you 3 examples of stupid laws. There were 2 girls in Dallas. They were selling lemonade on the corner. It was their dad's birthday. Cops rolled up. And you know what? Girls don't have a food license, a food vendor's license. We're going to close you down. And their mom came out and said, how can you stop these girls who are selling lemonade? Police were like, sorry, it's the law. And she made a scene. There happened to be a reporter driving past. He stopped. He's like, oh, I write down the story. And the girl said, you know what? Tomorrow, we're going to give away the lemonade. And we're going to accept donations for our dad's birthday party. Because there's no law against giving away lemonade. You can always give stuff away. They made $1,000 the next day. Their dad got an amazing present. And they went down in libertarian history. In Florida right now, there's a case going on with a couple that has a vegetable garden in their front yard in a community that has said, no vegetable gardens. Front yards have to be grass only. So like, this is our property. They own the house, okay? It's not a homeowners association. They don't have a contract with anybody else. The city doesn't like it. And so the city passed an ordinance that said you could only have grass or decorative plants in your front yard. They refused to do it, and the city hit them with a $50 a day fine. They managed to get a judge, get a lawyer who got an injunction, so they go to court and went all the way to the Florida Supreme Court, where the Florida Supreme Court said, no, the town can set that law. You can't have a vegetable garden if your town says it's illegal. That's crazy, right? I mean, how can your liberty be restricted at that level? How could it be illegal to sell something that you can give away for free? Talk about the girls with lemonade, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in our last slide. So, laws require law enforcement, which requires force. This is Eric Garner. Man had a hustle going on. Every day when he came home, Eric Garner was a father of 6. He would stop at the local bodega, he would go in and he would buy a pack of cigarettes, and he would come out and he would sell them loose on the street, what they call loosies. Sell them for $1 each. Cigarettes are $14 a pack in New York City. He was making $6 a day. He went back into the bodega, he would buy hot dogs one day, chicken, hamburger, whatever it was, and then he would go home and cook that. Was it a hustle? Sure, it's a hustle, no question about it. He's doing something that is technically illegal. But his argument is, I bought these cigarettes. They're mine. How can it be illegal for me to sell something that's mine? And one day the police came up and said, that's tax revenue. You are stealing from the government when you're selling cigarettes loose like that. Now, I can tell you, as a former smoker, I would have appreciated that service. If there was some day that I could go down when I was quitting and not have to buy a pack and just buy one cigarette, that would have been a good thing for me. He resisted. He didn't want to go downtown. He started saying, please, officers, I have kids I want to go home to. I want to, here's the money, here's the cigarettes. I didn't understand what I was doing. Did you understand it was legal? I don't know, probably he knew that he was pulling this. Well, they got tired of arguing with him. They put him into a headlock. He started complaining, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And they said, if you can talk, you can breathe. And then he stopped talking. And then he was dead. Did his resistance have something to do with him dying? I think probably, if he had been willing to go downtown and leave his kids at home, who knows, would he be alive? Maybe. Well, what I do know is that if there was not a stupid law saying that you cannot sell something that's yours, he would still be alive.
Right.
And let's think about that imposition on liberty. When we talk about regulations and laws that are in place, the Libertarian Party has a core idea. There are going to be times, and we are not, the Libertarian Party at least is not, we're not anarchists. I'm not an anarchist. I do believe there's a requirement for some laws in our society. But the idea that a law that restricts your personal liberty, that's a law we will always oppose. And that's our line in the sand. And so, when we talk about what's happening with the healthcare right now, right? The libertarian idea is repeal, no replace. Because the imposition on your personal liberty, that you are no longer allowed to buy a health plan that you want. So, I used to work at Mass General. They had a specific health plan for employees of Mass General who were in great shape and never qualified. But you could go in, and if you had a heart rate under whatever, and your body mass was whatever, you got a great insurance plan. And that was great for the people who did it. And honestly, it was an incentive for you to try to get into shape if you were an employee at Mass General, because you could get this great healthcare plan if you were healthy. Right? Makes sense, right? If you had a healthcare plan, insurance plan for people who are healthy should be cheaper. There's less risk. But that became illegal, right? When Obamacare came in. I know you guys remember, if you like your healthcare plan, you can keep it. But the reality of it is, they couldn't do it. They had to take away your liberty to stop that, to enable it so that everybody else could share the county healthcare. I go on to the next one. So this is the last line. This is going to sound strange for somebody from a political party to talk about. But the idea of the Libertarian Party of the United States, this is the world's smallest political quiz, by the way. If you haven't seen it, I recommend just look it up, world's smallest political quiz, and it's amazing online. We do this part of the Dog and Pony Show at every event we go to. I'll be out at North Shore Pride in Salem with this thing trying to convince people that they're libertarian. Politics, right now, is about controlling government. And it's about controlling government because there's money and power there. Libertarians believe that all power derives from the people. We are each in this room a minority of one. Whatever it is, there's something about you that's a little bit different from everybody else. You get to know me, I got some freaky things in my past. Lacrosse player, Dungeons and Dragons, grew up in Texas, all sorts of odd things. I'm a minority of one. The fact that there's only one of me doesn't mean that my right should be infringed upon. Democracy should be more than two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. Thomas Jefferson talked about the idea that the law can become a tyrant because the law can deprive you of your rightful liberty. So we have to make sure, and the idea, the novel idea of America, was that in our Constitution, we had a guarantee of rights. And the rights were the only thing the government was supposed to do, was to protect your rights. And these rights weren't given to you by government, they were your rights. The government defended your rights. The Libertarian Party is based on the idea that your rights are yours. Government shouldn't be taking your money. And John Dillinger, when he was finally caught, famous bank robber, they asked him, why did he rob the banks? And his answer was, because that's where the money is. Politicians today are our modern bank robbers. They are robbing the bank by getting elected to office and taking our money. If we come up with these few basic ideas, you are entitled to what you earn. We end politics because there's no more money at the end of government. Does that mean the end of schools? Does that mean the end of roads? Does that mean the end of social services? Frederick Hayek has a wonderful quote where he says, socialists often say that we are against roads, that we are against schools, because we don't want government to provide them. Well, that doesn't mean that you're actually against those things. The Libertarian Party recognizes the fact that if you want to look at some of the leaders in the world who have been providing healthcare, who are providing for education all the time, there's no government that's been doing that as long as the Catholic Church has been doing that, right? There are 8 completely free Catholic hospitals in the United States. They have a big sign on there, on the front door, Marlon Thomas's father. St. Jude's, right. Right, there's a big sign in St. Jude's that say, and we got a quote wrong, essentially, if you can afford to pay, please go somewhere else. But if not, you're welcome. It's worked. We have seen it work, and the problem is that we're teaching people that it can't work. Government knows that if people believe that there can be a free hospital without government intervention, what's their job? What's their job security? The Libertarian Party is premised on the idea that we're going to win elections so that afterwards elections will become mostly irrelevant. Because the government won't have any power to take away your liberty. And if the government doesn't have any power to take away your liberty, what do we need it for? Some very few things. And that's where we are. Self-ownership, non-aggression principle, and someday, the end of politics. Thank you guys very much for having me.
I gotta ask a question.
Yeah.
What you just said about St. Jude's, and what you just said about the, even the lemonade stand, what you can give away for free, why can't you sell it? Let's look at what happened to the Trump family about that great donation. I'm not sure, I can't remember if it was St. Jude's or the Shriners. One of the sons there gave 20 million, brand new wing, everything. Suddenly that all blew up because Trump's now president and he had to dissolve that whole thing there.
Right.
That ties into what you just said, isn't it? About the whole lemonade stand and everything. It's like, here's a private person giving his money, but somehow he's attached. Oh no, the government, no, we're going to shut that down now.
Right, and the reason why is because they're talking about tax revenue. The government doesn't like the idea that money is going from point A to point B, they're not getting taxed on it. B, that there is a charity that is being supported without the government being involved. Now, those of you who are old enough, remember Judy Garland and Mickey Rourke? They did an amazing commercial to end polio, 1945. You can see it online.
Sure.
Polio was ended by the March of Dimes. They founded Jonas Salk's research, okay? And what happened was, now Roosevelt was the president at the time, he suffered from polio, but it wasn't a government plan. He was the leader, he said, I want to lead, I'm not going to rule. I would like to ask everybody who wants to support the March of Dimes to put a dime in an envelope and to send it to the March of Dimes organization, which, I grant you, was run by a friend of Roosevelt's, but it was entirely private. They beat polio as a private organization. How can we forget that? Right? One of the worst diseases that was around at the time. And it happened without government intervention and without any so much as a giant organization, a department of polio. None of that stuff was needed. Instead, they said we can fix this ourselves. That's the libertarian ideal, is that we recognize that as we empower each of ourselves, we empower everybody.
And
recognizing the individual right. Yeah,
and why do we do this? Because the other guest was talking about government regulation, in that we pass these huge government regulations, and yes, they affect. We tend to forget, folks, that huge corporations and the government, when they pass regulations, they're in league together, and it really only affects small businesses, as you had spoken about earlier. This brings me back, I'm tying it into what I just said about this charity. We pass these laws, these regulations, so that people who are out there, who have the money and the means and the ways to solve the problems, they're restricted, they're not allowed to anymore.
Well, one of the interesting things, there's three popular criticisms of libertarianism, of deregulation. They say, well, you know what, if you empower the states, the South is going to bring slavery back next week. Slavery's not coming back in the South. They also say, you know what? If you allow same-sex marriage, people are going to be marrying their cats next week. People are not going to marry their cats. Well, maybe someone would marry them. But
who cares?
Right, exactly.
It's not affecting your life.
Exactly right. This is exactly the point.
Does it break my leg or pick my pocket? And I don't care.
Exactly. Well, right. And that's exactly it. Why would we care about something like that? Right. And I already forgot my third.
Well, why do we have to Why do all these regulations have to be passed? Everything is
right.
always about laws, everything is always about the things you can't do.
Right, thank you, Chris, for bringing me back on point. So the third big lie is that without intervention, monopolies are going to take over everything. Let me ask you, do you know, and I've thought about this a lot, this is a popular topic, I only know one monopoly in the history of the earth that came around without government support. Now, this is one of my favorite stories. There are going to be people who are old enough here to remember when it was illegal in the United States to own a telephone. Does everybody remember that from their childhood? Exactly right. It used to be that AT&T owned all the phones in the United States. You would pick it up on the bottom, they actually would track your line to see if you had illegal phones in your house. That happened because of this thing called the Kingsbury Agreement in 1913, where AT&T made a deal with the government. And they said, how are we going to, the government's like, oh, you know what, you guys you're knocking it out. You built the first long distance system. We want to give you the right to have all telephones everywhere in return for some restrictions. One of which is, we want you to provide phone service to every house in the United States, no matter what. Like, sure, we're going to be the only phone company, yeah, we're happy to do that. Another one is that we want to make sure that all the phones that are in existence continue to work. We're like, okay, we don't, it's 1913, we don't envision a lot of change happening in the telephone industry. And so over the years, they had this monopoly and they expanded and they owned all the telephones in the United States. And finally, in 1978, they said, you know what? Government, we're out. We are so restricted because at the time they were just starting to do data transfers to home. And AT&T proved mathematically that the fastest data speed that they could use that they were going to be able to build was 28K. And the reason why is because there was a house in the middle of Kansas that there was no transceiver near it. They had to run data over the copper wires. And they were required by this deal that they made in 1913 to provide equal levels of service to every house.
Across the country.
And so finally they said, all right, we're out. We're going to break this deal. AT&T, as you know, ended up getting sued for monopoly. They got broken up. And then the big thing became, who can connect long distance immediately? And so, one of the companies that was able to bring online long distance wires because they owned the path to run the wires, Southern Pacific Railroad, Southern Pacific Railroad International, Sprint. Sprint came online because they had these train tracks everywhere and they able to run long distance wires between all the cities that allowed them to bring long distance online. And so let me ask you, because we remember in this room, how much innovation has there been in the telephone industry since 1978 when the monopoly, the government backed, exactly right, since the government backed monopoly was taken away? There is one monopoly that grew organically. It's in my field, Microsoft. That Bill Gates, he's just a smart guy, ruthless businessman. He did it all on his own. He didn't have any government support. But aside from that, all the other monopolies that you look at, right, Rockefeller, American U.S. Steel, they all had the support of the government. Adam Smith in Wealth of Nations said, two people in the same trade seldom meet, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public. I do believe that there is some truth to that. People want to create monopolies. They want to lock down the market. But what happens when people try to lock down the market, right? Taxi cab owners have been trying to lock down their market for forever.
New York City is bad.
And what happened? Uber is killing them now. And in fact, the Massachusetts Uber law, that's got to be one of the most offensive laws I've ever seen. Because in the Massachusetts Uber law, they put a 25-cent tax on every Uber ride. And that 25 cents specifically goes to help the taxi cab industry modernize.
Oh my God.
How can you be required by government to help your competitors? So that's where we end up, is that government intervention, government power, government regulation always ends up supporting government business.
On the Uber, I've never taken it, but I understand